and you don't really want to be in relationship with guys like that. But they're attracted to you, but they need your gift. When we're healers, we have to learn the difference to separate our gift from who we are.
Do you ever wonder who you were before you became who you thought you were supposed to be? This has been the yearning question of my life. My name is Audra Lee, and this is Unbecoming, a Therapist. This podcast is for anyone who has felt the pressures of the world to conform in some way, or anyone who felt they had to wear a mask to gain the love and acceptance they were so desperately needing. Welcome to Unbecoming, a Therapist. Welcome to the first episode of Unbecoming, a Therapist. I'm Audra. And I have a very special guest today. Try not to get emotional already right off the bat, but I have someone who is, I think of as one of my best friends, my counsel, the person that I can call and I know is going to be able to check me and challenge me and a rock for me. None other than Andrew Lee, who happens to be my father. Welcome. Thank you for agreeing to do this for me. You flew in from Florida, all the way from Florida, to come and be on this podcast. How you feeling?
A little nervous, but excited for you. Excited for us.
Yeah.
I think it's a good start, or a good. It's a good time to do this.
I agree.
It's a lot of things that need to be said. I guess
Yeah. So the whole idea, we've talked about this, but the whole idea of even wanting to do this has been. Excuse me. This has been a process, a journey of leading up to the evolution of my identity. And for the last, I say maybe 10 years, I've been trying to figure out who I was before I became who I thought I had to be. And it's uncovered so much in that process. And a lot of people, I think, will see the name of this podcast, Unbecoming a Therapist, and think like, well, how the hell are you unbecoming a therapist and you're still a therapist? And it really is not about necessarily the profession. I happen to be a therapist, but it really is about the identity, the mask, the armor that I put on of being a therapist to protect myself, to provide a shield or some type of authority to move through the world. And it's not something that I even discovered that I was wearing until maybe in my early 20s. And I really found it hard to be able to relate to people if I wasn't in this cloak, if I wasn't wearing this mask. And so being able to understand that I had it on, started spurring this process of me wanting to figure out how to take it off. And I thought it would be most important to start with you in this conversation of my evolution, because I think you've been central to my identity as a therapist and in all of the beautiful ways. And I think you've been one of the people who've affirmed me around my gifts and my skill set. And I think I took that and I have ran with it. So yeah, I see this as an opportunity for us to be honest, open, transparent, and have fun.
Okay.
Yeah. Before we get into the conversation, so I do smoke weed. and I am a smoker, so I'm going to take a couple puffs to like relax my shoulders, get into the conversation, because it's going to be good. We talked last night about the first time that you and I smoked together. And it was funny because I didn't know that you felt some type of way about that. It was like, one, I didn't remember when it was. So it was just like, oh, yeah, and we have always been kind of open and transparent with one another. So I was like, oh, I didn't know you had a feeling.
I did.
Yeah.
And as you said, we were friends already. So we were used to talking, being open and honest. But I had recently only started smoking again myself.
Right.
After 30 years of not smoking. So
right.
The idea of smoking weed with my daughter was, even though you were 29 years old, it was terrifying, to say the least.
And for a long time, you felt like weed was not a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm old school, so I was taught marijuana is terrible, it's bad. You're a thug, a gangster, a hoodlum. All those things go with that. But it's a gateway drug and all the whole.
Oh, the gateway.
Yeah,
that was huge. It was a gateway to crack
to heroin, crack, whatever horrible thing could happen to you if you smoke weed.
It was going to happen. It was inevitable that if you smoke weed, you were going to end up on crack.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Which was the furthest thing from the truth, of course.
When did you start changing your thought process about that?
Oh, wow. I went to Jamaica. With my wife, and I was like...
I never knew that.
Yeah, I was like, you know what? Going to Jamaica, and usually when we go to other countries, we try their food. We try what the natives do. And I was like, you know what?
You just decided to try?
Just decided to try some weed. Me and my friends.
Okay.
I won't name my friends.
Don't incriminate anybody. Wait, and then you loved it from there?
No, actually, I stopped after that. It was just, a one-time thing, and then I had surgery.
Right.
And it was, it was more of a medical thing for me at that point. Well, I think I dibbled and dabbled. And so when you and I smoked, it was not something I did on a regular basis at all.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't remember it being like...
Yeah.
And nor did I at the time. I think it was like it became more of a thing during the pandemic for me.
Yeah.
And then also, like, as I've gotten older, alcohol just doesn't sit well in my body at all.
Yeah, me
and
too.
that is, I feel like a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, smoking is just, you need 2 puffs and,
2 puffs.
Yeah, it's perfect.
I think that once the stigmatism went away from, it was no longer a boogeyman now. Now I was a grown man. I wasn't a kid. I wasn't breaking the law. I was a grown man. And I felt like, you know what? Okay, I could, in moderation, I could use marijuana for whatever I needed,
Totally, yeah.
And so,
what
no big deal.
What's it like having me smoke right now?
Oh, no problem, no issues at all for me.
Okay.
I mean, I know who you are, and you are very much in control of your life, and you have a well-balanced life.
Yeah.
And, I mean, if I thought you couldn't handle it or it was, going to make you somehow psychotic, then I would be concerned. And there was a time when I was concerned that marijuana, being more of a psychedelic type of drug, was not good for our family in particular.
Right. Yeah, we've always made that distinction too. And I mean, like, we're obviously going to dip into that. But like that, our family history of mental health issues has been something that drugs and what it could do and how it could exacerbate it was always part of the conversation. So that was always something I've been aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
my thought process went to when we were talking about our family history was being able to process some of the family history there. And I titled this episode The Gift. And the reason I titled it The Gift is because we've always talked about this idea that I have this gift. And it was something that I think growing up, I didn't know how to put it into words. But when I think about how to define it, it would be an ability to be empathetic, an ability to listen, the understanding of emotions and being intuitive and how to connect to people on a deeper level. And it was like something that you always told me, this is your thing. And yeah, I thought that was something that you could see that not anybody else could see. And so I kind of want to go back to like, where did that thought process come from? When did you first notice that in me? And what was happening that made you notice that?
Well, it's important to understand the backdrop of how you even came to be. Mm-hmm. 1986, I met your mother. Mm-hmm. I was 19. She was 29.
Mm-hmm. Can you expound upon that a little bit? I feel like that's a pretty big age gap.
Yeah.
And you usually, and this is totally part of the patriarchy, right? Mm-hmm. But you usually say the inverse of like men being significantly older than, their counterpart, and it's the other way around. So like, was that a pattern for you? Like dating older
it was. I mean, of course, when I was, 12 and 13, by the time I was 14, I was dating someone who was 3 years older than me. I was a freshman in high school. Jamie was a senior in high school.
Which is a pretty big deal.
It's a pretty big deal.
When you're that
pretty big
age.
Difference.
Yeah.
But I was never really interested in doing the things that the kids my age were doing.
Why not?
Because I had a plan. And I had a mission. And they didn't know, nobody knew my mission but me.
At 14?
Yeah, but I made the plan at 5.
What was his plan?
Well, long and short of it is I was sitting on the porch and the ice cream machine came by. I was with my brother, Paul. Mm-hmm. And the ice cream truck came up the street, and all the kids, of course, ran to the truck, and so did Paul and I. And everybody's dad came out of the house and paid for ice cream for the kids. Mm. And me and Paul were left standing there, and the ice cream truck driver, I'll never forget this guy's attitude, but he said, what do you guys, you got any money? And we're like, no, our daddy's in New York, but can we get ice cream? He said, no, you can't. And he closed the window and drove off, and it was really very cold.
Jesus.
And I remember at that moment being I didn't know that moment would change my life so drastically, but it did. And it wasn't that, so we were wondering, how can we find our dad? We knew there were 2 police officers. Mm-hmm. We didn't know they were park police, but there were 2 police officers up the park. We lived across the street from the park. We said, we're going to go up and ask those officers about finding our dad. So we ran up to the park. The officers are sitting out there on their chair eating their little sandwich. These are City of Pittsburgh park police. They're not real. Yeah. Right. But we don't know that. We're 5 and 6. And we said, man, can you help us find our dad? He's in New York. His name is Glenn Lee. Oh, yeah, we know Glenn. Can you give us his phone number? He said, yeah, I'll give it to you. You ready? I said, yeah. He said, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And this is during a time where you didn't need to even put the area code, the
No,
code in. So it's just the number.
7 numbers.
7 numbers. And but I want to stop and realize these adults were mean as shit.
Horrible.
Like, what the hell?
I didn't even know it.
God. So you have these adults who are like, no, you can't give you the ice cream, and then gives you this fake ass number.
Well, I'm going to tell you. So you talk about wanting to be, dating older women, sort of not wanting to do the things my friends were doing. This was the moment, because when I got home, we ran home. Mm-hmm. We had a phone, long cord, reached out to the porch, and we dialed the number. I'll never forget. It was a red phone, rotary phone. We dialed the number, and it said, doo, doo, doo. The number you have called is not in service.
Right.
So we called it again and again and again. And then it hit me. They think we're kids.
At 5.
At 5, I had a sentient moment. I know I'm overusing that word, but really, it was a moment where I said, they think we're children. And they didn't give us a real number. And then I understood. I immediately understood that I was a kid and nobody was going to believe me or hear what I had to say. Nobody was going to hear my cry. So I made a pact with myself that I was going to have a family, that I would have a wife, 2 kids, maybe 4. And
where did you even get that concept?
Probably from the television, probably from
you had
Leave It to Beaver, or
right.
Some show that was out back then.
And they had their dad.
Gotcha. Everybody, and then all the neighbors on the street had dad, and
which
we
is
didn't.
Wild when you think about that, because I think my childhood growing up was vastly different. There weren't any fathers around in our our community, so that at that time it meant something for you to not have your dad.
Yes.
Okay.
Everything has changed. Most of the people in the hood had a dad when I was growing up. We were the family who didn't, and we were the odd family.
Gotcha.
But, from that point, I'm just determined to have a family. I tried to get married at 14. I had a child, which was not an accident. It was I'm going to start my plan. So the thing is, I started my plan from that moment. My plan was seriousness. I'm not playing any games. I've refused to play hide and go seek anymore, or any of the, the games that the other kids were playing. I lost all interest.
Gotcha.
And I looked toward older people. I thought, well, they know, and they could help me a little better.
So the mission at 5 became this is what it is, and then everything became just like a straight line to get to this goal.
Every dating relationship, I wanted to be married. Everything was funneling into this black hole of this family, this ideal family.
What did you think it was going to give you?
I think it was going to give me the satisfaction that I didn't have from my dad with that ice cream.
Okay.
I was going to finally get my ice cream cone.
Gotcha. That was going to do it. Okay.
And it really, it was a powerful moment for me. But I didn't realize it was such a driving force in my life until much later when I look back.
That helped, you explaining that helps put chips and pieces together. Because even so we went all the way around, but the original question was about how you met my mom and, the age gap there. And so all of this, and I imagine you meeting older women and knowing that they're older made it even more, did that drive you to date them when you found that out?
Fortunately for me, older women were attracted to me. So I didn't have a hard time. And once I started talking to them, they were fascinated that I could talk on such a mature level.
Right. Yeah, because anytime I have a conversation with my mom, and I'm like, So, you were 29 and he was 19. Does that ever feel confusing to you? Like, what, I just, because I remember being 29 and I could not imagine dating somebody 19. So and she's like, he had the gift of gab. It's her answer. So I'm like, obviously.
I was serious, and I thought about world politics.
Gotcha.
I thought about now I had already been to the University of Pittsburgh, so at 17 I got accepted to University of Pittsburgh. I spent time with Dr. Vernell Lilly, the late great Barbara Streisand, Lee Kabiri, some of the greatest minds in Black thought in Pittsburgh were my early mentors. I didn't realize what I actually had, though. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
At 17. So by the time I met your mother, I was out of college. I was in this transition period in my life where I was transitioning back to the street that I had escaped, which was terrifying for me.
Gotcha.
But your mother she was a healing balm for me.
Gotcha.
She was mature, and she knew how to speak to my pain and inspired me. In fact, she inspired me to go back to college, to reapply, and I applied to Robert Morris and graduated. So it was a chaotic
There's a lot
time
happening there.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But you came along at a particular period because my brother had just died.
Right.
And this was the brother who everyone in the family, he was the strength of the family. He was the soul of the family. He was the one we anointed as the sweetest one in the family.
Right. Which meant something.
Yeah. Because I was certainly not.
Right. Like, I don't think that was any descriptor I would use to describe anybody in our family. Like, sweet is not a Lee family trait.
Term,
yeah, it's like.
But
we
Glenn,
got a lot of other,
which is why he was special.
Gotcha.
Because he truly was sweet.
Yeah.
Now, he was vicious if you got in his sweetness to protect his mama. He was a mama's boy.
Gotcha.
And she could do no wrong. He treated his sisters, his brothers well. Glenn was a sweet man, really. But he was just died. And at this point, another pivotal moment for me was just a few years earlier, I became a born-again Christian. Mm-hmm. So now, becoming a born-again Christian and having this great sense that I need to be married. Mm-hmm. Your mother and I were living together. I was living with her. Mm-hmm. And I proposed to her. I proposed to her because I felt like, I don't want to live in sin. Mm-hmm. And she, in her great wisdom, she said, I truly appreciate it, but you should think about that a little longer. And she said, I just don't think the time is right. And she put me off for a couple of times. Yeah. I got down on my knees like 4 times.
Yeah.
And each time.
Was it 4, Dad?
No, it was 4 separate occasions.
What? Okay. Right.
But it was over a 2-year period.
Okay.
So, but my thing was, I just can't. I told her I didn't want to be away from my family.
Right.
My first child was was estranged from her because her mother, met someone else. And so I said, the next child, I need to be married. Right. And she knew this. This was part of our conversation, part of the healing balm that she provided for me was that I was very upset about losing connection with my first daughter.
Yeah, totally.
And it devastated me. So I made this, again, another pact. I'll never have a child unless I'm married. Yeah.
You got a lot of pacts with yourself.
Pacts, yeah. And so...
well, when you talk about Uncle Glenn dying, I think that's a moment where... And I think about this, like, I hear this story told to me, and I can't remember if I actually remember this or if it's just a story that, like, is in that I've remembered based upon people telling me, but it was when Uncle Glenn died and you came over, and it's, you and my mom, I think, were just separated during that time. And everyone tells me the story where, I consoled you, but it was in this very mature way, so you were crying and I came over and I said, "It's okay, Daddy, and it's going to be okay." And that was always lifted up within our family. Even in the storytelling, that meant something, that you were able to connect with him, you were able to soothe him and console him. And so that is like the thing that I think is part of my spark of like something clicked for me at that point. Oh, when I caretake, when I step into this role where I'm empathetic, that makes people happy. Right?
Yeah. So I had never had someone so close to me pass away. In fact, I didn't know anyone who had passed away. And so for Glenn, like I said, the sweetest guy in the family to die so suddenly. He was 29 years old when he died. And so he really was just a kid.
Right.
But he was my older brother. I was inconsolable. It was the first time in my life I was staring into the abyss. And I mean, mental illness was not very far from my eyes at that point, my thoughts. And so coming over to your house, I was inconsolable, but you were almost, your gifting and ability to be able to console me at that time. I think two things were happening. One, your mother was a caretaker. So she was taking care of your grandma. I think she was taking care of your uncle. She was taking care of another great uncle.
Yeah.
She had like all these people living in her house that she was taking care of. And you were always around that. So it was very natural, I think, for you to console me
point. Yeah,
in that moment.
Yeah.
But yes, we did recognize something special.
Yeah.
So
What did it mean to start to put therapist to the title to it? So like you were in the field, you were, in schools, you were a counselor, and I would say my mom has that natural ability to, to counsel. So there's this, there's this family tradition or history there. And then you both were always big on putting me in therapy anytime there was something that came up, which I thought was pretty progressive for Black people at the time. So that was something. And I remember one of the first experiences with a therapist was a woman named Dr. Pat Piercy, Black woman. And she was like the first woman, I'd say, who I felt like sat with me and like leaned in and was, like just talked to me and looked me in the eye. And I was like, damn, this is nice, because I think at the time you and my mom were very busy. And then you were still trying to figure out your lives. So my mom was always bouncing around, and she was taking care of people. So she was bouncing around all the time. You were bouncing, you were young, you were a baby. So you were bouncing around. This was like someone who was like, okay, now let me sit next to you and talk to you. And that was one of the first times I feel like I felt that experience, and it felt so good. So you got this gift, you're empathetic, and then I got this person who leans in, right? And I'm like, and she gets paid for this? I could do this shit. This is amazing. I can lean in, I can look at people, and I can talk to them and connect with them. This feels amazing, right? So then I go to the space where I start putting this together. I want to be a firefighter, and I want to be, like a ballerina, and I want to be, a basketball player. And I was like, I want to be a therapist. And everyone was like, what the fuck? Like, you're 10, like, who says that at 10? So, and not even more, I think, I got praise and validation from that. But, like, what was it like for you to start to hear me affirm that was what I wanted to do?
Well, I think for me, there was a period that's sort of stuck in my mind when you were probably about 15 years old. You had come to live with me and my ex-wife when you were 13. And so by 15, you and I were fast on our way to friendship, although we had some bumpy moments along the way. But it's still very much, rigid father-daughter relationship. Right. But there was space for daddy and daughter date night, which was, I think, every Wednesday for a while. So that was, so we did kind of do some things. But I was going through a divorce. And, I was getting separated. And I remember sitting in the car, and I was just venting and didn't know you were taking it in really as much as you were. And you started to give me advice. Now, by this time, I had already had a stint with therapy. I had a therapist that I was working with, training with. I was a counselor. I didn't actually have a therapy degree, but I did practice under the late, great Dawood Akbar, who was a licensed therapist clinician. I was also a certified drug and alcohol counselor. So I was touching the field. But I could recognize those who were awesome, those who were gifted by nature to do.
And you made a distinction.
I made a distinction.
Okay.
So if it was just, well, she's good at it, she can do a lot of things, I probably wouldn't have been so excited.
Gotcha.
But when I heard the level of your counsel at 15, I knew. And I told you at that moment, I said, Audra, this is a gift. You have it. And if I were you, I would pursue this hard. Like, it's very evident.
Right.
And I thought you would be like most other children, to be honest, who say, well, I'm definitely not going to be a therapist.
Right. He said do it, then right. Well, there's also this thing, too, which was like, I wasn't good at much else. And, we talk about this story where, you're like, your mother she was like, you were like, she just believed in you so much. She tried to, gymnastics and all this other shit, God. Playing a piano.
She took you to everything possible.
You're like, Audrey, give it up. She's just average or something. So, I mean, it was hilarious.
I don't know if I said
maybe not average, but it was like, give it up. Like, I didn't really gravitate to much. I tried to play basketball one year.
I remember that. You were a cheerleader. You were a basketball
player. Cheerleader. None of it really stuck. And so, I think that was the one thing.
Well, I also knew you were an intellectual.
Yeah, right.
And that is a gift.
Sure.
And by this point, I knew you were like me in a lot of ways. I knew you in terms of this gift and desire to help people, to read people, to give back. You had it. You could see insights that you had were, it was like uncanny. And so, it was a natural fit for you at this point.
Right.
And I think it came from both sides because, again, your mother was a caretaker.
Right.
And she was taking care of people all the time. And you were born into that environment. So...
Totally.
A lot of young people run from their father's, mother's counsel.
Right.
Thank God you didn't, at least in this area.
Right.
Because
I feel thankful because I think when I look back on even knowing, so thinking about it becoming a defense mechanism and thinking about how, in a lot of ways, I started really using it to, I would say, hurtful, to snatch power, to again protect myself and hide. And it just became so natural because I knew I could. But I think about all of the ways that it was beautiful too. It shielded me. It made me similar to your path of like, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to drive towards it. When you do that, it really encapsulates you from getting derailed in life. So to have that understanding at such a young age, even though I would, I'm going out, I'm hanging out, I'm doing shit, I'm still like linear focus on that goal. It was not a question. I was like, no, I'm going to be a therapist, and not only a therapist, I'm going to be highly successful at this. I didn't want to be like, I seen the tropes of therapists in these offices, and they're shuffling papers, and they're perpetually broke. And I was like, oh hell no. That's not the way I want to do it. I want to be like in a nice shiny office and like get like $7 coffees and like, and do really fucking good work.
Yeah.
But also be like a representation of fashion and, vibrancy. I wasn't trying to be like poor. So the whole dynamic of like this identity as a therapist has been tremendously helpful in so many ways. When I start thinking about when it became unhelpful is building relationships. That's when I was like, so getting out of school, being, linear focus on going to college and going to college specifically for psychology, and then knowing that I need to go back to school to get this other degree because, it was tremendous in all of that. But trying to build relationships with people, it was like a wall. And it was like dating. I would use it and I would think it was connection, but it was really like me. I would analyze somebody that like the first week or something. And I'd like tell them everything that I got about them. And people were like, what? I'm like, well, this is connected to your childhood and your dad. This is why you feel lonely, because your dad was never around. And people were like, well, yeah, that's true, but fuck, And so I was always having this, like, hitting this wall thinking, no, in my family, this, like, is a good thing, And in every other area of my life, I'm getting rewarded for saying these things. But when it was like, how do you be vulnerable and truly connect? That's not what that is. The gift is like a strength. But if you're not also roping in compassion and vulnerability and transparency, that's just abuse, right? So that's when I started to see, like, ooh, something. And for a long time, I'm not going to lie, I was like, it's clearly them. They're the problem. It's not me, right? Like for a long time, I felt that way. And I think I could because, we had a big family. I had cousins. I had people who loved me. I was like, I have enough people around me. When you have, you had 11 siblings, I had enough cousins to say, fuck them, they don't know, it's them, you're not the problem. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm not the problem. Move on. But yeah, so I thoughts about that, like, did you, because I know you've expressed concern about ways it became arrogance or connected to arrogance.
Well, there were two concerns. One, the first concern I had was that there were people drawn to you who were guys that were on the periphery, if you might, of being a gangster thug type. And I was vehemently opposed to that. Like, I felt like I had to protect you from my former lifestyle, and where I came. I mean, I came up in a very different fashion than you.
Right.
You know, gangsters and thugs were the order of the day. I mean, it just was what it was. You know, and so I wanted to shield you as much as possible, and I saw that there were people drawn to you, particularly men, who were. I just didn't think they were right for you. Not that you were better than them, but you were very different. And then I said to you one time, I said, you know, these people who are drawn to you doesn't mean, I said, because of your gift, you're going to have people who think they're in love with you. But it's not, you're not meant to be in that kind of relationship with them. You're meant to be in a relationship with them to help them. You don't sleep with your
But
clients.
that was really hard to like as you know, a teenager.
Yeah.
Oh my God, to
Yeah.
grasp it. I was like, he is tripping. He's crazy.
Yeah.
What does he mean? I'm not. This is clearly the love of my life. Like
Right.
I can help them, and
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, you trying to make that distinction was like really challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
I
of the
remember that.
conflation
Yeah.
of again this identity that I put on to say, oh well, this is how I should operate all the time,
Right.
or in that construct. Yeah.
Yeah. And I recognize it wasn't fair
Yeah.
as a parent to expect you to, you know, just operate in this gift from now on. But I'm an extremist. And once I saw, once you affirmed the how you helped me, I knew. And it was like, okay, now I'm seeing what's happening. Now I know, you know, this guy, he really does feel like he loves you, but he's in and out of jail. I mean, he's selling drugs or he's doing, I'm like, no.
Right.
No. That's not what, you're not about that. You never was raised like that. So,
Right.
and you don't really want to be in relationship with guys like that, but they're attracted to you, but they need your gift. When we're healers, we have to learn the difference to separate our gift from who we are.
Sure. Totally.
Because it's a gift if it's given to you.
Totally. I think that the awakening that started to happen, which is like, I think that happened around going to grad school and being able to start to put language to some of the things that I was experiencing, like oppression, you know, specifically around my gender, was like, that's not something we talked about as a family in the Black community, right? So that was like, I was starting to liberate myself in a way that was going to allow for me to make that distinction. I think that was probably one of the moments that turned like, wait a minute, something about this is not, I don't have a good grasp or control on it. It's not effective in the way that I'm using it. And so when I started learning about myself, and I started learning about some of the things that I was experiencing and how I never processed it, you know, the trauma, what inevitably happened is because we were close, was I started bringing it to you and challenging you around it. And it was like I would say that was probably one of the hardest times in our relationships, because we ended up doing, you know, this explosion kept happening. Can you talk a little bit about that, what that was like for you that time? Was that a sigh of...
It's one of the toughest times in my life. You and I had grown close, but there was one system in place up until that point. It was pretty much daddy's rule. And, of course, I was comfortable with that.
and
But
we talked about the patriarchy. That was
patriarchy.
clearly,
But I had one hard, fast rule. All while we were growing up, because we grew up together. But the rule was, if you could beat me in a debate, if you could win the debate by just making your argument, not disrespecting me, not snapping out, but make your debate, then I'll listen. And I don't know what age it was. I think you were 22, right before you moved out.
No, it was after that because I was
Oh, was
already
it?
in grad school.
Okay, yeah. Well,
Or heck,
all right.
yeah.
So at
Probably
this
20.
point, you were
Yeah.
definitely at the point where you were
Right.
learning yourself, looking
around
back.
25, yeah.
25, 26, which we were down at
Yep.
Lefty's bar.
Lefty's a little local
And
bar in Pittsburgh.
we were having some debate, and I was being typical dad. And you backed me down, and I listened to your argument, and I was fully prepared to like shred you to pieces.
Wow.
And your argument was so impressive, and it was so it to the point where I had nothing to say, and I had to back down. And I remember saying to you at that moment, "Okay, now we can be friends. Now we can both be on the same level because you won. You won that. It's fair and square."
Yeah, you know that whole
It's terrible.
story. Okay, because we were talking about this before. I gotta hear in the acknowledgement of
Sure,
the dysfunction in these things too.
Sure.
But okay, I just
get
want
it.
the records
I'm
to
just,
show.
I'm just, giving you my mindset
Right,
at the
right,
time,
right.
But I recognize that hindsight,
Looking back,
looking back, the fact that there were these rules in the first
right,
place,
right.
is a bit crazy. But again,
Right.
I was
At the
5 when I
time.
planned all this. So,
we gotta bring that
yeah,
back.
yeah. I mean, so
Absolutely.
it's not nothing. None of this is really set in reality.
Right. It's set in a
Except
5-year-old's
it's
perspective.
a 5-year-old's
in some ways,
mind,
yeah.
and I'm driving this thing,
Right.
and I'm driving.
I never
this
even thought
thing.
about that rule coming. That being a rule that you had set in stone in such a young age. Like these ideas of how it needed to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember that at Lefties, and yeah, I remember that. That whole challenging time I felt was like it was hard, but it was teaching me how to stay in relationship. It was teaching me how to be vulnerable, and bring something that was
Well,
really
that was the beginning,
Yeah.
because you didn't let up after that. Once we had that newfound relationship, and really what it was is I had gained a new level of respect for who you were
Right.
and your maturity. So I should have had it from the beginning. So it really didn't need to happen this way. But for me, this is the way it went
Right.
down. But you then proceeded to come, and I don't know how much time elapsed in between, but I just felt like there was a stretch of a few years where you began to stretch me and challenge me on my whole foundational ideology about male superiority, chauvinistic things.
Yeah.
You began to introduce the principles of feminism into my life.
Do you remember that
To
first
which
conversation?
the first conversation, I went
You
completely
were like
off.
a feminist. I didn't raise you like
no damn feminist, and I was
because in your perspective, you thought, man hater, bashing men.
Yeah.
I would become
right.
what, like just an angry male hater.
Yeah, I think there is of extremes
Sure.
in all
And yeah,
parties, and I think I was subject to the media blitz that happens around feminism, and they
Right.
show you the extreme
Right.
feminists who are willing to bomb buildings and kill people. I
Right.
mean, it can go as far as to the left as you can get. But what I didn't know was that I was the one who was the prisoner. That my mind had been, and my ideology, by following probably purely Judeo-Christian out view of things, and funneling everything through that with with an American slant.
Right.
I mean, it's
Right. It's
kind of
scary.
it's scary to
Problematic.
think of how layered my thinking was.
Right. Right.
And I was, you know, I mean, I wasn't ready for the challenge, but I think the fact that I loved you so much, and that I saw and I knew that you had a gift, that I was willing to hear you in areas that were very painful for me to even consider.
Right.
I think the one particular moment I can remember, I think we were at the jazz festival. And we were down in Pittsburgh at the jazz festival. And you said, I need to talk to you. And you sat down, and there were a lot of people around. And you said, you know, I'm bisexual. And I broke out in tears and
Yeah, you did.
ran out of the building. And I remember somebody seeing me on the way.
It's in such a lead, like, you
very
know,
dramatic fashion.
no, you know.
Right.
Yeah. I love it. Well, not at the time.
And, I would remember just crying and feeling, I didn't know what, blaming myself. I
Because your
remember
thought
coming
process
back,
was what at the time?
that I was too open with you around sex. Your mother used to say, you know, why do you talk to her about these things?
Right.
And I'm like, because you don't.
Hello.
And somebody's got to talk to her. But
Mom, you'll have your day, your time to speak to these comments.
But because I had lost my virginity at 9, and the girl I lost my virginity to was 9, so I felt like, okay, you know, at this point we have to start talking to her about sexual things and being realistic. And then I never believed in treating children like children.
Right.
I mean, my thing was at 5, I planned my family, so they can understand. You think they can't, but they can.
Right.
To some degree anyway, because it's all filtered through a child's mind.
Right.
But so anyway, I thought, you know, I was too open with her about sexual things, and
Okay.
this is, you know, my
So
fault.
I
I didn't see it as you liberating yourself,
Gotcha.
or you casting off the constraints of, you know, gender pressure.
Right.
I didn't see any of that, nor was I prepared to deal with any of that
Gotcha.
at that time.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I remember you coming outside and you saying, Dad, it's not about you. And you then started to just pull the layers. I mean, you went in on me. And I said, Audra, I get it. I think I hear you. But I feel like a rubber band that you have stretched. And if you stretch me any further, I'm going to snap.
I remember you saying that.
And I just need you. I said, just give me a little time. Just a little time.
Yeah.
I can't, like, I know you want me to do this work. And I know it's the work I need to do. But I can't do it right now. Not ready.
Yeah, that was a hard one.
So, but in typical Audra fashion, you didn't let it rest. I mean, you let it rest that night.
I let it rest that night.
Yes,
Are you kidding me?
But you didn't. It's not.
Well, I mean,
it wasn't
how much
like
time
you
did
forgot
think
about
you
it.
need? I gave you like a week or something.
Yeah, it was a good amount of time.
Yeah, take a week
and for the next, I think, 2 years, we'd have these conversations. We'd sit in the car and we'd talk about everything, and you would point out areas where I was being chauvinistic or misogynistic or not seeing the feminist role. I remember one time I was spitting my newfound feminist language, and you got pissed, and I was like, but I mean, this is the right stuff, right? And you were like, but Dad, you're not a woman, and you're speaking to women, and you don't even see how, you have to be humble in this arena, even, and I did not get that, because I'm like, I'm gonna be the greatest feminist in the fucking world.
Oh, I remember that day. You were so pissed. You were like, I'm trying to be evolved, and you're still telling me I'm fucking up. Yeah.
The process to learn
Totally.
how to evolve was grueling. And then what happened is I started seeing my friends and people I loved and my pastor, and I started challenging them on some of the things that you were challenging me. And it was tough.
Yeah.
Because once you wake up and you see the patriarchy,
right,
it's like the Matrix.
It is.
It's like it's very
really
hard
is.
to go back to sleep.
Oh my gosh!
You'd have to kill yourself to go back to sleep, or kill your conscience.
Literally.
Yeah.
That's a really absolutely. I mean, you said, I feel like I couldn't have said it better. And I think, again, this unbecoming process is like everything, the evolution of waking up and then realizing like there's no floor to this. Like you just keep waking up. And to the first time I said out of my mouth, I don't want to be a therapist anymore, it was after talking to Solari, my sister, and she said to me, she just said it, because I was saying how, tough it can be in times, and sometimes it brings me to a point where I don't feel like talking much, during the week, because I'm like, I'm all talked out. And she's like, yeah, I never seen the way you do therapy. I never seen that for you. You seem so much like a free spirit that the structure seemed like it was not conducive. And she was like, why don't you just stop? Don't be a therapist anymore. And we laughed, and I felt like I was 5 again. I felt like, what? Not be a therapist? Like, it was like I was naked. And I was like, oh, it was like, oh, I kind of like that, but I'm also kind of like nervous to even say that. I remember going to Brian and saying, I don't think I want to be a therapist anymore. And like,
Brian is your husband.
My loving husband. And he's like, okay. And I knew it was deeper than just talking about not wanting to do therapy, because I love what I do. But it was like, something about this has to stop. The level in which it consumes me, it consumes my life, what I carry after I leave session, the ways that I am. Again, I did all that work to challenge you, but like, when I think about that role and playing that role in every area of my life, it was depleting me. And it felt like it was getting in the way of me being able to get back to the evolution of who I truly was. So being able to start even just saying it out loud has been so liberating. And this podcast is just that. I feel like it's that physical representation of the evolution. And we're kind of at time, but I want to kind of get your thoughts on what it felt like for you to hear me start to say that when I start to say it out loud.
I wanted to hear your pivot plan, because I knew you had a pivot plan.
Okay.
I've recreated myself a lot, so I knew that was something was possible with you. But
I was really scared you were going to be like, what?
No, I've learned that you. I know who you are. You're resilient. You're powerful. You're smart. and I knew that you had a pivot plan. So I said, shared your plan, and you shared me this plan. I thought it was beautiful and brilliant. It's a way to stay pretty much connected to therapy, but to do it on a different level and gain even wider appeal and help even more people, really.
Right.
So I thought, brilliant. Now the entrepreneurial side is you're marrying the therapist side with the entrepreneurial side, and that to me that's the
Yeah.
the
There's
icing on
something
the
there.
cake. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great
Yeah.
way to do it, because it is a gift, and your gift will put you before kings and queens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome.
Yeah.
I really always enjoy our conversations, even when it gets heated, because I think because we are so similar, even though we haven't had any like.
No, I don't win much anymore.
There's no winning or losing.
Yeah, I know, but
Always
I think that's the new.
Is that why you feel like you can put up a fight?
It's just the reality is now it's how all those years where I won. I don't win very much anymore, and I'm glad. I'm excited. You have outshined my wildest dreams. Who you are is so amazing. I think about your life and what you're doing, and I'm just so proud. For a long time you didn't have your beloved Brian, and I remember I was with you. We started talking about that.
Yeah, right.
When you found like the courage to just wait a little longer.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Not be so thirsty. And he walked right into your life. And you guys, and I used to always tell you something my mother told me: the first shall be last, and the last shall be first.
Very dramatically. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. And I was always like, yeah. And then, times where I was like, why can't I fight? I'm like, the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. I'll get it one day, I'm like, goddamn, is the last, like, how old is the last when they start getting it? Like, I start thinking about that shit, like, wait a minute. What's last mean in this context? But, yeah.
So I think 29 was a good age.
That was the last.
It was a good age. It was a good age. The last of your 20s.
Yeah. Yeah.
And look at you now.
Yeah.
I mean, wow. Just the flower that has bloomed.
Thank you.
You and Brian blooming together. It's, what do they call them? Light benders.
Bringing it back.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I love you.
I love you more.
Hey, it's your host, Audra. Thank you for listening to the Unbecoming a Therapist podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and make sure you comment, subscribe, and rate the show. It means the world. You can keep the conversation going over on Instagram at Unbecoming a Therapist. See you next time.